Now, of course, there's been mixed reaction to the arrest of the Gupta brothers in Dubai. And, of course, according to the statement by the country's police, the two men were being held in connection with money laundering and criminal charges in South Africa. The police also say that they were acting after receiving an Interpol raid notice, which was a request to law enforcement organizations to provisionally arrest them pending extradition. Let's look at this further now with Professor Pierre, UCT Claude Foundation Chair in Constitutional Governance, Hennie van Vuuren, and Open Secrets, in fact, Director. Thank you so much to you both for your time this afternoon. I'll begin with you, Prof. It's been a long wait for South Africans, and some are excited yet cautiously optimistic. Are we any closer to seeing the brothers in South Africa inside a courtroom?
Well, maybe closer, but not far from there yet, because the mutual assistance agreement between South Africa and the UAE makes it clear that this is just the start. There has to be now a request after the arrest for an extradition. Then there's a first round to see if the minimum requirements are met, including that they are being charged for a crime that is also similarly prohibited in Dubai, in the UAE. And then it has to happen within the legal system of that country. And then right at the end, there's still a provision that it can be refused the extradition through the political process for reasons, for example, that there will be serious humanitarian harm caused because of the person's age or their health or whatever. So it's by very far from a done deal.
Hennie, we're listening to that, and of course a lot of what has been said about this. How confident are you that this process might wrap up quickly, looking at the fact that South Africa is even yet to get Shepard Bushiri from Malawi to come and account?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we had Shepard Bushiri in our hands, Bongiwe, but I think that, as Pierre rightly says, I would agree, it's far from a done deal. And in part, I think it has to do with the politics of the United Arab Emirates. We need to, I think, just remind ourselves that instead of having Minister Lamola and the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shamila Batoy, at a press conference the weekend, letting us know what happened, it was in fact the media agencies that broke the story. It was confirmed by the Ministry of Justice. And I think it seems like our criminal justice agencies have been caught on the back foot by the UAE, which has acted alone. And that begs the question, why would they not immediately start to work with their what we would imagine would be their partners for accountability in South Africa? And I think, Bongiwe, the answer is the UAE, as we've argued, is in fact a country that's built in large part on a criminal economy. It's a tax haven, it's nice and glitzy for shopping, but ultimately it thrives on dirty money from across the world, including the state capture loot from South Africa. Now, the UAE this year has been reviewed by the powerful countries in the world that review countries for their ability to tackle money laundering, something called the Financial Action Task Force. They've placed the United Arab Emirates on what's called a grey list, a watch list, to say they're not getting their act together. I think what we're worried about is that the UAE has realized they need to show the world, and that's not South Africa, that's Washington, D.C. and London and other places, that they are serious about tackling money laundering. And they are going to use the fig leaf of the arrest of the Gupta brothers to say, look, we're serious about this. But that doesn't mean that they want these people and these individuals extradited to South Africa. That means it's an enormous challenge for the NPA, for the Ministry of Justice, to make sure that we send a very strong team to the United Arab Emirates to argue against any bail application brought by the Guptas. We know they've got a base in Uzbekistan, and we know they have a India, and ensure that those criminals remain in prison until such point which they can be extradited to stand trial in South Africa. But I don't think we should, for any political reason, believe that the interests of the United Arab Emirates and the interests of South Africans who want to see justice for these crimes against the South African people, that these necessarily align.
Now, Prof, not a lot is being said when it comes to the charges that they're likely to face. We're seeing from the statement by the Dubai police saying that, they're looking at money laundering and other criminal charges. But of course, you think Gupta leaks, you think the State Capture Commission's report, you think of the cases that are out there, you even think of some of the developments that we're seeing happening now, that maybe there could be even more charges here, because we see, bribery as a possible charge. What other charges are you seeing being part of the charge sheet?
Well, at the moment, they have been charged, and that is a precondition for the process to start, for very minor criminal offences dealing with the Free State. The money that they needed for the Gupta wedding after the landing at Vuuren. Most of the cases, we don't know how far they are, but it doesn't look like they're close to ready to be prosecuted. The larger questions, the capturing of Transnet and Eskom and whatever, obviously, if they're going to be prosecuted for those things, it will include corruption, fraud, money laundering, and so on. But we really don't know, because we haven't really heard anything from the NPA, and we don't know how far they are along with the Hawks in investigating and preparing winnable cases.
Prof, it came as a surprise yesterday that there's 2 arrested. Did it surprise you as well that the third one is still not in police custody?
No, because the red notice was, as I understand it, only issued for these 2 brothers. And they might also, I don't know whether that is the reason. Some of the reporting said that they happened to be the 2 people who were in the car or wherever they were apprehended. But in terms of the law, it makes sense, because the red notice wasn't issued for the third brother.
And when we look at this, Hennie, one of the things that some have said is that this really puts the spotlight on the fight against corruption. As you've said, and the Prof has said, that it's now the challenge to show how serious the UAE is going to be on this one. But when you look at South Africa, does it take us a step closer to getting some of the answers when it comes to some of the questions around to the capture that we then saw even laid bare in the State Capture Commission?
Yeah, Bongiwe, I mean, I guess your point about the Zondo's Commission on state capture is an important one. It's given us, I think, the best insight we have into how the system of state capture worked. And I think what South Africans really are demanding now is, of course, accountability. The NPA has not been as effective as they should have been. I think they've had very formidable prosecutors like Advocate Hermione Cronje and others who headed up the investigative directorate leave that. They had started to do the hard work, including these red notices that had been issued for the UAE to nab the Guptas that had been done. But we now need to see these high-profile individuals in court, and we need to see them prosecuted. And I think we need to be very wary of all manner of political interference that's been run to keep South Africans' attention away from important matters like these. The prosecution of the Guptas would inevitably open up the potential for more information to be revealed about the involvement not only of other members of our own political elite, those include top ministers and potentially the former head of state, Jacob Zuma, but certainly the role of very big South African and global corporations without whom the Guptas would never been able to run their criminal enterprise in the manner in which they South Africa. So I think this is crucial, but really we can't, just to make that point again, Bongiwe, we can't wait for charity from the UAE. It's about the NPA putting its best foot forward. It's about Advocate Batwe giving us the names of the prosecuting team that she's putting on a plane to go to the UAE to make sure that these criminals are brought to book and brought home to South Africa. And I think, we should remember that the Gupta's attorneys, from what I understand, they've already landed in Dubai, and they are preparing the case in the interests of their clients. And their clients have a lot of money, and some of that stash is stolen money from the South African people. So we need to move quickly, we need to move professionally, and we need to hold the NPA to account, because it ultimately needs to work in the interest of South African people.
And Prof, as we round up our conversation, I can't let you go without asking you, please pardon me, I have to ask you about this. What do you make of the developments around the president? I mean, there's been quite a lot when it comes to this, alleged burglary at the farm. Today we saw what purports to be a video, and there's been so many questions on that front. Is that case strong enough? Does he have, because at the face of it, he's got a lot of questions to answer to.
Yes, of course, the initial reaction might be because the revelations or claims were made by the former head of the intelligence service, whose job really it was to deceive people. One must take it with a pinch of salt, but there seems to be really something in this. It doesn't make any sense that somebody would have quite a large amount of cash in a foreign currency at their home, and there are regulations. You're not really supposed to, unless you get special permission, you're not supposed to be able to transact in South Africa using foreign currency. And if you do, you have to make a notice, and you have to promise that you're going to pay the money back to the forex dealers within 24 hours. So we don't know what permission was or wasn't given. So yes, there are clearly serious questions that need to be answered. But of course, it's not possible at this point to know exactly what happened. Because we just don't have all the information.
Prof, I tell you what, there's so much happening in the news cycle. It's it's like we're just blocking off so much legally. And I do think we'll speak again very soon just to get a sense of how things are going. But let me thank you both for your time right now. That's where we'll leave it. Professor Pierre, UCT Claude Leon Foundation Chair in Constitutional Governance, Hennie van Vuuren, Open Secrets Director. Thank you so much to you both. And on the other side of this, Francis speaks to a lawyer who's going to be talking to us about the process that is about to unfold now to get the Gupta family here in South Africa, the brothers who were arrested.